Hey everyone, welcome to another Care Thriving video. As I'm going to mention, this video is pretty short. It's kind of a stream of consciousness, but it's basically meant to address if you're in the hospital right now, your child's been born, and something's wrong, what do you do, right? And I'm going to be talking about getting to know who the care manager is in the hospital, which is a very important person and has a lot of control over what's going to happen to you in the hospital and when you leave. And you need to find out who this person is right away. And the importance of placing what's called a bed hold if you think that there's a severe medical condition that you're dealing with. All right, so here we go. Remember, like and subscribe. It's really helpful to this channel if you do that. If you smash that like button and or even make some comments, it helps us out a lot. Thanks a lot. Here you go. Okay, my child's been born. Something is wrong. I'm in the hospital. What do I do? All right. So, hindsight is always 2020. So hopefully this will be helpful for somebody who's in this situation. So when our son was born, our little guy Hezekiah, I think it was like the first week we knew something was wrong, right? So he was born and he was full term, but he was really small. He was just over 5 pounds, almost like a preemie when he was born. And he didn't latch on right away. And I remember we were in the hospital and my wife was there, and he wouldn't latch. And nobody knew that, his medical condition at that time because he's only been born for the first 24 hours. But something was wrong. We knew that, but nobody really had in the hospital had quite a clue yet. I remember one of the nurses came in and grouched out my wife because and tried to tell her that she wasn't nursing right. And the child come find out would have a severe neurological condition, but everybody was clueless. I guess they weren't able to tell that at the time. So unfortunately they made my wife very uncomfortable, telling her that she was doing everything wrong or something when the child was obviously severely disabled. And so he ended up having an NG tube, a feeding tube through his nose so he could eat. So, we took him home, and I think at the first 48 hours, we went for the follow-up visit to the pediatrician. And the pediatrician looks at him and says, "You need to get back in the hospital," right? And we're like, "Well, what's going on?" Like, he was making these little twitching things. We didn't know what they were, and they ended up being seizures. And she was like, "Yeah, I think he's having seizures. You need to get him back in the hospital," right? So when we went back to the hospital, this is, I think, within the first week, we're back in the hospital, right? And they get him on the EEG, and they're like, yeah, he's having massive seizures, and so then the fun begins, right? So at that point, in retrospect, when you go into a hospital, there's a number of different people, right? There's nurses, there's doctors, and there's also a person you'll probably never get to meet. It's called the care manager, right? And when you go to the hospital, you want to make sure you find out who the care manager is right away and get the business card. Get their business card. They'll have a business card. This is going to be a really important person in your stay. This is the person who basically is one of the main decision makers on what happens to you in the hospital, how long you're in the hospital, and what happens when you leave the hospital, right? And strangely enough, most people, when you go to the hospital, you'll never meet this person or know that they exist, right? Which is probably how they can function for the most part, right? But you want to find out who the care manager is right away. So anyways, we went back into the hospital, and they started doing the million dollar battery of tests, right? They did the blood test, they did the urine tests, they did the EEG, they did the MRIs, they did the CT scans, they did the spinal tap. It went on and on and on for a week, like every test. We got an infection disease expert came in, nobody, because everything was coming back normal. Everything was fine, right? No reason why the child should be having seizures, right? They even got an infectious disease expert to come in because at the time, the Zika virus was the latest thing and everybody was concerned about that. And, they did, just, blood test after blood test and lab work and lab work. Like, we're not talking about like basic CBCs. We're talking about extensive lab work, right? Everything's coming back normal. So at this point, I think everybody starts to suspect that it was a genetic issue, or we'd ruled out basically all their options. So they wanted to put him on anti-seizure medication at that time. So that's a whole other story. But anyways, we left. We checked out of the hospital, and basically, the triage continued 24/7 in our house. But what I should have known, and nobody told me at that time, is that the hospital should have done what's called a bed hold for him. And basically, when you have a person who is, having a severe medical issue, and there might be an issue where there's going to be Medicaid or SSI involved, which clearly, there would have been when you have a child with a severely developmental neurological disease and probably is not going to live for very long, there should have been a bed hold placed on him. So what that allows the hospital to do is basically bill Medicaid and bill SSI for a lot of the extensive hospital charges, which, if you're having an experience like we will, you're going to have a lot of hospital charges, right? Right? When they're doing extensive workups and problem solving, and you're in the hospital for an extended period of time, and you're getting experts coming in, so all this stuff is going to get expensive really, really fast, right? But nobody's talking about this at this time, right? So I think the first year we had $500,000 worth of medical expenses for our child the first year, right? So, you go home without a lot of, we went home with no answers, and, we had a new course, trying some anti-seizure medication, stuff like that. But what was happening in the background, think about it, is all those bills are going to start coming in the mail in a few weeks, right? So, so all these, once the bills start coming in, and I start talking to people, and they're like, oh, and at this point, we actually had him on SSI and stuff like that, and because of his condition. But after the fact, looking back, you're 90 days into this whole thing, and everybody's like, oh, why didn't they put a bed hold? It's clear that there's a severe, health developmental issue here. They should have put a bed hold, and then, everything would have been okay. You wouldn't have these multi-$1,000 worth of bills coming in, right? And I'm like, bed hold? Right? Nobody's mentioned this, right? So, it took a long time and a lot of pushback, and somehow the hospital was able to make this somewhat retroactive, or they wrote it off, I'm not sure. But we had thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of bills. And a lot of it could have been addressed really easily if that care manager would have said, oh, look, it's a newborn kid. There's obviously a serious issue here. We should place a bed hold. We should place a bed hold on this right away, right? Nobody did that. So if you ever find yourself in the hospital, or maybe you're having a child right now, maybe you're in the hospital, you should find out the name of your care manager. And you should say, maybe we should put a bed hold. Maybe it's called something else, but there's obviously going to be a lot of medical expenses. And, I think a lot of times at the time we had private health insurance, but a lot of times, you'll end up getting secondary insurance, which could be OHP or through Medicaid, which could be extremely helpful. And the bed hold would still apply in that issue, is my understanding. So anyways, if you're in the hospital and, you're not just in there for, this is turning into something far more complicated than you anticipated, you should definitely find out who the care manager is right away, right? And you should have them place a bed hold on your patient or your loved one who's in the hospital. It's going to be a lot helpful for you moving forward. All right, I hope this is helpful. If you're a medical professional, you have anything to add, please put it in the comments. Share your information. So, and I think later I'm going to also do some videos of, maybe I'll call it hospital horror stories, or special needs horror stories or something, of all the fun stuff that happened, that maybe we can warn people ahead of time. That would be helpful for you moving forward. All right, take care. Good luck.